You betrayed everything I ever stood for. Let me down. Oh, why? Do you think I care for you so little that betraying me would make a difference? Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 8 finale, Dark Water and Death in Heaven, written by Stephen Moffat and is directed by Rachel Talalay, which was actually kind of a big deal at the moment because Rachel Talalay was, at the time, at least in the 90s anyway, was a big movie director, having directed such films as Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddy's Dead, and also Tank Girl, which, if you know those stories, know those films, they're horror films, or at least inspired by horror films, at least when it comes to Tank Girl in any way, but they're not usually considered like high praisal, but apart from everything apart from directing, and with Stephen Moffat not giving a great track record of love late, we needed a strong director like Rachel Talalay to bring out some really great moments, as we do get here. This story is also noticeable for the full appearance of the character of Missy, played magnificently by Michelle Gomez. It is also notable for a very controversial aspect to the story, which you can't talk about this story without mentioning a very important part of the narrative, which is hugely controversial and it upset people to the point where the BBC had to bring up a statement about the episode. It's also, as well, the first finale to feature Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, finishing off his first ever run on the series, and is supposedly trying to tie up loose ends from series, not only from series 8, but also from series 7, which we'll talk about when we get to that. So, yeah, this, in terms of the general consensus, this story isn't considered so highly. It does have its fans, don't get me wrong, but if you looked at this from an outside perspective and you just generally looked at the reviews and the audience reception of this story, you'd find that this is not very well liked, with some barring exceptions within the episode itself. For example, Michelle Gomez's portrayal as Missy, not really Missy herself as a character and how she plays into the plot and the narrative, but mainly the actress Michelle Gomez's performance. It's also noticeable as well because it's also a Cyberman story, and I do feel like I'm trying to giving spoilers away on that. However, it was in like all the trailers advertising for the story, and as well, there's loads of hints throughout the episode. So I think if you know your Doctor Who history, you know the Cybermen were coming in this adventure. However, the Cybermen don't really play that big a part in the narrative. Sure, they are used, but they're more in line with their appearance from the next Doctor. What I mean by that is they're usually just used as sort of soldiers to perpetrate the true villain of the story's purpose. It's their plan. And it's Missy and her association with the 3W, the 3-word company, the 3-word system. So, with that out of the way, let's delve into this episode. And I think what everyone can agree on this episode, on this story, is that the first 10-20 minutes of Dark Water are easily some of the best writing that Stephen Moffat has ever produced. Let me set up the context. The first thing we see is Clara trying to talk to Danny on the phone. Though the relationship here has a lot of tendencies of stuff that I didn't like about them throughout the relationship, Clara constantly telling Danny to shut up, I need to tell you something, which kind of makes Danny feel like he's in a abusive relationship here. But what I really like about this is what actually happens and how the scene is portrayed. Essentially, what happens is that Dan, on the phone to Clara, tragically died getting hit by a car. As he's distracted because he's on the phone to Clara, she was trying to tell him that she loves him, undeniably, like not like a offhanded kind of thing, as in she does genuinely love him. And then suddenly there's just silence for a long time, and Clara's just like, okay, please reply, it's absolutely killing me. Dan? Dan? Only for a stranger to pick up the phone, and basically it's like, I'm sorry, the car came out of nowhere, I'm so sorry. This is such a grounded, such a real way that people die. You know, just somebody was distracted, they got hit by a car, and they died from that. It's nothing. It's not a grand sacrifice. It's not a bombastic ending to a beloved character. I could feel the temptation was there to make it like, I don't know, Missy was the one to kill him, or maybe in the previous episode Danny was supposed to die, and then this was built off from that. Although in the Forest of the Night didn't really feel like a story with death in it, but you could feel that there was a temptation there, and if this was any other series, it probably would be this spectacular bombastic death. But here it's just a normal death, a death that you could either imagine you actually dying from, or you being Clara in this situation and being the one on the other side of that phone call. It's really disturbing stuff, and it works really effectively, and it plays into Stephen Moffat's strengths as character building. Clara goes really distant from the rest of the world. That shot where she's running to the road, and she's got this kind of that eerie smile that she had, that Jenna Louise Coleman has, as the camera pans around and discovers like the street is like completely fine, and it tells the audience essentially that time has passed, but she still is like, hold on, she's still, for her, this is like a recent memory. And that is some really great directing, some really great cinematography. And Coleman's performance in the first half of the story, where she, in that kitchen, and she's just really she's like phased out from the rest of the world. She's got this blank exposed expression. She talks kind of monotone, and she's like, Danny's, why should I be sorry? Danny died a normal death. It's boring. I don't deserve better, but I am owed, or something like that. And I love how as soon as the doctor picks up the phone, she puts on this persona of her previous thing, because the doctor doesn't know about Danny's death at this moment in time. And Clara, she puts on a smile face. She's like, oh, doctor, hooray! I want to go and see an active volcano. And the doctor's just like, no, you can't have it. Actually, that's in a flashback. That is because the pre-credit sequence is the Clara basically on the phone to the doctor as she doesn't tell him about Danny, basically hinting that there's a plan. When we come back into the episode, not counting the flashbacks I've just mentioned, the doctor seemingly is knocked unconscious on the floor outside his TARDIS, near an active volcano, not active, but a volcano of sorts, as Clara is holding the TARDIS keys for ransom, and she basically tries to get the doctor to take her to save Danny Pink, to save his life, to try and change time, alter history so that Danny Pink survived that incident as the doctor, and just that scene, the acting from both Peter Capaldi and Jenna Louise Coleman, the dialogue, the setting, the way how at the start of it Clara is completely in control and the doctor is like out of his depth, but then the doctor uses reverse psychology. It's just like I said no, so go on, put the TARDIS key in the lava. Do as you're told. I love that, the way Peter Capaldi says that line. But it's just so full of gravitas because we understand Clara's point of view and it's pushed her to the edge. It's doing that dark aspect of Doctor Who that the Series 8 was advertised to be. But it is kind of strange how this comes off right after from a televised point of view right after In the Forest of the Night, probably one of the most child-friendly episodes in the entire series. But, well, I say child-friendly, it's presented child-friendly, but that's another story. So there's that great moment where she's just like, she basically can see that the Doctor is taking control, and so she basically throws all the TARDIS keys except for one, and she's just full of emotions, full of all of these ideas and her mourning for Danny, and she actually dropped the last key into the lava, and she just bursts down in tears, and she's like, "I'm sorry, Doctor, I've betrayed everything you have done for, and now I've locked you into your TARDIS, and we're going to die on this lava." But the Doctor doesn't seem too concerned. In fact, all he does is really tell Clara to look at her hand. And we basically reveal, because in the flashbacks, we basically learn that Clara found all the TARDIS keys, and she asked the Doctor for these things to help her sleep. And the Doctor tells her no, but she finds them and she knocks the Doctor out with them. But we find out that the Doctor actually, it doesn't work on the Doctor, and she puts it on, and he puts it on her hand, and she's the one that knocks out. And it turns out it's actually like an optical illusion of sorts, and none of this actually happened. She just threw the TARDIS keys onto the TARDIS floor. And I really love this aspect because it is actually real for Clara. Clara, from her point of view in that scene, at that moment, she believed all of it. She actually went through with it. And if that was a real situation, she would have dropped all the TARDIS keys. But the Doctor, it was fake for the Doctor. And the Doctor, she pushed that kind of reverse psychology. He kind of knew he could do that because, for his point of view, it wasn't real. This leads into easily the best scene in the story, and where Clara's like, what happens now? Where do we go from here? And the Doctor just goes, "Go to hell." And Clara's like, "Fair enough. That is absolutely fair enough." And she starts to walk outside the TARDIS, and the Doctor's just like, "Wait, where are you going?" You asked me where we're going, and I told you, we're going to hell. There's every culture, or at least most cultures in the universe, have a concept of the afterlife. I've always wanted to find out, which then leads into the scene which I quoted at the start of the story, where the Doctor basically announces that his friendship with Clara is so strong that even betraying everything that he stands for means very little to him, as long as he can help his best friend. This is one of those moments, those darkest hours, back up straight, see what kind of stuff we're made of, as he connects Clara to the telepathic circuits connecting this story to listen. And the TARDIS basically takes Clara to where it's very likely she'll meet Danny Pink next. And that takes them into the 3W company, which we then get introduced to Missy. And right at the start, she has this kind of ploy where she pretends to be an android, and she kisses the Doctor, and when we know who she is, it's pretty funny, to be honest with you. But it's kind of like are you trying to tell me that in previous stories, them two, this character might have had that kind of relationship with this kind of character? It's very strange. It is very, very strange. But Clara, Missy isn't actually an android, by the way. She's just acting. And she then introduces our characters to Dr. Chan, played by Andy Lung, who does a great job here, despite him having very little to do, very little to work with. He does a great job at basically giving these explanations of what's actually happening as they go into this kind of museum of sorts of these skeletons in these water on chairs, and Dr. and Clara like confused by all this, like why have these skeletons in these in this water? What's the point of the dark water? As Dr. Chan basically explains that the 3W means the three words, and the 3 words is something which pushed a lot of rich people into investing a lot of money on preserving their bodies for the departed. And that 3 words, which is the controversial element of the story, is don't cremate me. And we also see in as well in the story has the back of the round storytelling here is that we see Danny alive and well in the Neversphere, which is scenes that we've previously seen from previous episodes in series 8, where we get introduced to Slab, played by thick of it actor Chris Anderson, who, you know, the fact that he's back with Peter Capaldi as well, and we have this like office set in, brilliant, and Anderson does a fantastic job here. He's one of the most fun side little characters that Doctor Who's ever produced. But basically, the entire concept here is that people are still semi-conscious when they depart, but not only that, they are connected to their body that they are now. So, if your body is stored in a cold place, your body feels cold. If your body, if your body gets a cut on the arm, you are connected to that and you feel the cut in your arm. If you're cremated, and this is where the controversy begins, because essentially it's basically, because, you know, Doctor Who is a family-friendly show, and part of that audience is kids. Now imagine you're a kid and you had a family member who sadly passed away recently and they got cremated. And then you've got a Doctor Who story which basically tells you that not only was that like a bad decision, but your loved ones would have felt every single second of being burnt, essentially alive. I know they're technically dead, but burnt alive as they're still conscious from their physical body. It is perverse. Now, as a viewing audience, as an adult watching this at the time, who hadn't had any of his kids of his own or didn't watch it with children, it didn't bother me per se. As somebody, you know, I've grown up, I'm a mature man. I understand that this is fiction as well, and I've seen more adult content. But I do understand why people are so upset with this, especially parents and especially kids who might be disturbed at this very gross concept. Now, the BBC, like I said, have apologised, but they apologised. Part of their apology is that they said, but in the context of the story, it was technically a con. The Doctor confirmed right after that scene that it was a con, it was a ploy, it was nothing, it's not real. However, the Doctor says it's a con in disbelief at first. However, he slowly grows to the concept that the afterlife does technically exist. But it's the Neversphere, not heaven or hell or anything. And that means in the concept of Doctor Who, every kind of person, every person who travelled with the Doctor, all of his friends who passed away, had suffered this kind of horrible death, especially what happens to these consciousnesses after during the story, as Missy activates the Neversphere. And we basically learn that all those dead bodies, all those bodies that their souls have been loaded up into the Neversphere, are all just there to be processed, to get ready to be turned into Cybermen. As we build up to the finale of the cliffhanger, which is the only two-parter in series 8. So this was the only cliffhanger of series 8 in which the Cybermen are out stomping around London. As it turns out, the 3W is not the heart of England, at the heart of London, and we basically learn, massive spoiler warning if you haven't seen the story or you don't know Doctor Who at this point, this particular area at this point. Missy is revealed to be short for the Master. Michelle Gomez is playing a new female incarnation of the Master. Now, Michelle Gomez is a fantastic actress, and I say this as well in the hindsight that I know that she becomes a much more well-defined, much more mastery character in later stories. But here, it's not the master. It's basically your typical Joker, crazy bonkers character. Michelle Gomez is doing a fantastic job, bringing so much energy to this role. Especially like that bit where she pretends to be like, "Can we play now?" And there's that great scene where she's with Osgood, and she's just like, I got a secret, just us girls. You're gonna be dead in a minute. I'm not joking, but it's manic in a way that the Master never was. It's nothing that does. There's no core aspect to the Master in this portrayal, in this story. I want to stress that Michelle Gomez is by far the best thing about this incarnation. And I say this as well in the hindsight that she does get better later on in the series. Just here, it's a great villain performance, but it's not the Master. Or at least not in my opinion. And that again leads into Death in Heaven, where I forgot to talk about Danny's whole plot. I'll say Danny's plot for later on in the video. As basically all of the Cybermen are coming out stomping, and the Doctor and Missy get captured by UNIT, Unified Intelligence Task Force, as we see the return of Kate Stewart and Osgood in the story, which is just so cool. I'm so glad that these characters got to return, especially Kate Stewart. Although she does have those kind of quirks of Stephen Moffat, where they just list these character traits after them when she gets introduced in the story. But I understand that Peter Capaldi might have been somebody's first Doctor, so you do need to introduce Kate in this way. Just realise that if you don't know who these characters are, they just kind of just appear at the start of the second episode, and you just got to take the story's word for it. I don't know. I just find that pretty funny. Also, well, at this point, Clara is stuck in the 3W building, and the Cyberman is about to kill her because he knows her as Clara. But Clara basically pretends that she is the Doctor, and she basically disguises herself as a Doctor. This feels very Stephen Moffat-y. In fact, the closing to the pre-credit sequence is Clara's saying, Clara never was real. She never existed. Somebody who could change their face, somebody with so much confidence with the Cybermen. Don't you know who I am? I'm the Doctor. That feels really Stephen Moffat in a way that I don't like. It's so forced and contrived here. Sure, we've had a similar idea in Flatline, and I really liked it there. But here, it felt like Stephen Moffat wrote himself into a corner, so he tried to make out, ooh, look at me, I'm creative and clever. But Clara just acting like a completely different character. I know Clara's like a school teacher and all, but was one of her things is that she was a really great actress as well. Not as in Jenna Louise Coleman is a great actress, she is a great actress, but I mean Clara as a great actress, Clara the character. Yeah, it's really odd. It feels like Stephen Moffat trying to confuse his audience, like, oh look, maybe she is the Doctor, maybe it's not, just to have fun. And it's also as well, the story just has this fun little beat, though I'm not too keen on it, but I know a lot of people do enjoy it, is the actual credits. They swapped the names of Jenna Louise Coleman and Peter Capaldi, so Coleman's name was first, and instead of Capaldi's face in the opening credits, it's actually Coleman, which, can't you say the photo they used was pretty poor, but yeah, so basically the story he's trying to say for the most part is that Clara is a Doctor. Doesn't really work, but it's Stephen Moffat trying to be Stephen Moffat. And right off, everything in Death in Heaven really just does not work. The concept of Missy, basically, her character here makes no lick of sense. She sets up the 3W system as someone to harness the rich to get to turn them into Cybermen, but she also already has the technology. She already has the ability to turn dead people into Cybermen. She has this sphere of Time Lord technology to harness the souls of people and put them into Cybermen bodies after their bodies have been converted into Cybermen, using this kind of cybernetic pollen, which takes the form of this ring. And that's incredibly... So what's the point of the 3W? What is the point of the 3W as a company? You didn't. You could have just had the Cybermen, upgrade a farm full of Cybermen, send them up in the air and have the rain pour down and convert them. And speaking of the rain, we later learn the rain, basically Cybermen go up into the sky and they explode themselves and they turn into these clown that they rain down, and they start converting the dead. All the graveyards, all of the mortuaries, all the dead people, all over the world, all over England at least, get converted into Cybermen. But we later learn in this story that the Cybermen actually plan a second crowd, a second storm of rain, which would kill anybody on sight, anybody who's in the rain, and convert them into Cybermen. So what's the point of the first rain? Wouldn't it make sense to use the second rain first, killing everybody, turning them into Cybermen, and I don't know if that will also turn the graveyards into Cybermen, but then you can activate the second rain, and then you've got, like, your plan just works so much better if the order's the other way around. There's also Missy here has a lot of scenes where she's full of control of the scenes, like you have the cliched villain is trapped, but clearly they're going to get out in a very easy and very clever way. But it seems like they were all building this up to part of the plot of the storyline, but it never leads to anything. In fact, this story basically reveals that Missy is the person that gave Clara the doctor's phone number, and as well is the person that put the letter, puts the information in the newspaper so that the 12th Doctor and Clara would meet up again in Deep Breath. What that has to do with anything in Missy's plan, no idea. Absolutely no idea. It's so silly, it's so stupid, it has nothing to do with anything. But speaking of issues with the story, let's talk about Danny Pink, because a part of his story in Neversphere is that he's coming to terms with his past and why he left being a soldier. We basically learn here the reason he left being a soldier is because he accidentally killed a innocent kid in warfare, and that basically guilt-ridden him for his life, and he became a school teacher after this. Also want to mention, I did mention in my previous video that I was going to talk about the short lockdown video, Fear is a Superpower. I have watched it for this marathon. However, when watching it, I basically realised this was just a catching up. It doesn't give you any new information. It's just going through Danny Pink's life. So there's nothing really much there, apart from some really cool artwork. So that was really cool. But the idea is that Danny is coming to terms with him basically killing somebody, and at the end of Dark Water he gets so upset by this, and also as well after talking with Clara using his iPad thing and basically trying to convince her that he's not real so that she doesn't go into the afterlife, doesn't kill herself to try and get to Danny. Zeb gives him this iPad and where he can delete his emotions and turn himself into a Cyberman. And the last shot of Deep Water is that you see the kid's reflection in the iPad. In the very next scene in Death in Heaven, where we see Danny Pink next, you see the kid standing there. We see Danny looking up as all the lights are turning off, as the Neversphere is basically awakening and everybody's getting turned into Cybermen. But then, and then that's it. That plot line of Danny deleting his emotions and his connection to that kid never brought up again. This whole plot line of Danny becoming a soldier and becoming a school teacher because there's something tragic in his past. It was one of the incidents which we got introduced to him as a character, the one where he's crying in the school because he killed somebody that wasn't a soldier. That was just one of his big plot line as a character, completely forgotten about in the final act. Speaking of the story arc, let's talk about the story arc, because throughout Series 8, basically we've had these random clips of characters dying and ending up in the Neversphere, where they get introduced to either Seb or Missy, or Missy is like witnessing the adventures of the Doctor and Clara. How does any of those scenes, which distract from the main plot because they have nothing to do with those plots in those narratives, how do any of those plots, have those scenes in those stories, influence or improve anything in this story? This was the season for me which made me absolutely hate these storylines, these story arc heavy storylines. Sure, I've had my grievances in previous, especially the 11th Doctor's era, but here, where they took me out the episodes that they were currently telling, and then looking back after watching the finale, this series didn't need a story arc. It was just so distracting and nothing is built up upon. We basically learn that Danny gets turned into a Cyberman and Clara needs to turn off his emotional inhibitor because somehow he is still connected. A lot of people got confused by that. However, I think the idea was because we didn't see him click delete, presumably he didn't delete his emotions. And because of that, because it was stalled, not because of anything he was chosen, maybe he was distracted, because we never got a payoff from that scene. Danny didn't delete his own emotions, so his emotional inhibitor was still active, which is a really, which I do actually kind of like, because it actually does kind of connect Cybermen to their previous roots, where they want you to turn yourself into Cybermen. They believe that this is kind of a blessing. The fact that they gave Danny the choice to delete his emotions was actually something I think is very Cyberman, but it doesn't play any. It's a very small detail, and it's more to do with Missy, the Master's plan, than Cybermen's plan. So that really really bugs me per se. And basically we learn that Missy has this bracelet which controls all these Cybermen, but she doesn't want this power. She doesn't want all of this influence. She doesn't want this army. Basically, she's given this bracelet to control the Cybermen to the Doctor. As she explains, she wants the Doctor to see the way that she does. Now, if you want to save all those people in the Daleks' camps, now you can, because now you've got an army of Cybermen. All those battles where the bad guys won, now the good guys can come in to save the day. And I guess that's the story's kind of build up as like that was kind of the storyline of the series. As you get these flashbacks to the Doctor basically proclaiming, it's like, am I a good man, from Into the Dalek, and other scenes where Danny is saluting the Doctor and stuff. And it doesn't make a lick of sense, because in no story in Series 8, or in most stories by that matter, would the solution be a Doctor who has an army. Would the army help him teach that girl not to take her medication? No. Would an army help the Doctor and Clara turn a Dalek good into the Dalek? No. Would the Doctor take in an army in any other story? No, he wouldn't. Like, what is Series 8? And it's so frustrating. It's so, it's just so, We also have a scene in which Doctor needs to find some information. He tries to talk to Danny. It's like, I need that information. You're connected to the hive mind. Tell me what the Cybermen plan are. The Cyberman plan is the second reign. So I've already spoiled that plot line, but it's really dumb anyway. And Danny basically proclaims that to get into the hive mind, he needs to turn off his emotional inhibitor. And that's what he was trying to get Clara to do. Turn off his emotional inhibitor so that he can find out this information. And the Doctor's just like, I really don't want to kill you, and I don't want Clara to do it, but I need that information. But Clara then is like, give me the sonic screwdriver and let me turn your emotional inhibitor off. And the Doctor lets her do it. What? In what mindset would the Doctor let Clara essentially kill her boyfriend? The man she loves. I know the Doctor doesn't like Danny, but that is just seriously messed up. And especially later on in the story, in this particular story, like literally like 5 minutes after this scene, the story completely contradicts itself by the relationship of the Doctor and Clara in this scene. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. She turns off the Danny's emotional inhibitor. Danny basically explains the second cloud. Missy comes along, comes get the bracelet, which I've already mentioned. But however, the Doctor basically realizes something, that when Missy was doing a command, doing this presentation of all, one Cyberman was not acting, and that was Danny, and he was, because he's so in love with Clara, which is completely nonsensical and completely goes against the emotional inhibitor. As the Doctor gives the bracelet to Danny, who sacrifices himself and all the Cybermen to destroy these clouds and sacrificing themselves for the greater good. And the Doctor, and there's a scene then where Clara basically has Missy at gunpoint, and this is what I mean about it. The Doctor doesn't let Clara kill Missy because it'll save her soul, it'll save her, but he would let Clara kill her boyfriend, but he wouldn't let Clara kill Missy because he cares about, and the Doctor basically decides he's going to kill Missy to try and save Clara's soul, if that's what it takes. What? This doesn't make a lick of sense in terms of character, in terms of plot line. Doesn't make any sense. And in this scene, Missy gets killed off by a Cyberman, which we later learn also saved Kate Stewart falling off a plane. I completely forgot to mention about the whole plane situation and the Doctor being president of the world, which goes up against everything the story stands for. Yeah, there's nothing really much to talk about there. It's just the Doctor's president, and it's I don't really know much to talk about it. But this then introduces another really messed up thing about the story, because we basically learn that the Cyberman that saved Kate Stewart is Kate Stewart's dad, Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, classic series companion Brigadier. Nicholas Courtney's beloved character, Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, turned into a Cyberman. I will admit, when I first saw the story, I did piss myself laughing at the idea of just calling a Cyberman a Cyberdeer, a Brigadier, Cyberman, Cyberdeer. Actually, no, I tell you, I cried when I first saw this scene. I was in tears. Second time I watched it, then I was laughing. And ever since then, I've just kind of had this kind of attitude. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was really great to see the Doctor and Brigadier having this interaction for the last time. But the fact he turned into a Cyberman, one of the things, because, you know, the Brigadier has met Cybermen. He knows it's a horrible, disgusting fate. It was something he'd probably rather die than turn into a Cyberman. And this also has the implication that other Doctor Who companions like Sarah Jane, Adric, Castrina, Sarah Kingdom, all turned into Cybermen after their deaths. A horrible fate where they either felt their consciousness connected to their body, so if their bodies were cremated or shriveled up or cut or any way, they would have felt it, damaged in any way they would have felt it, and also as well they would have been turned into emotionless, robot-like entities. What the hell, this story? The story then ends with our characters basically lying to each other trying to save face, with Clara basically pretending to the Doctor that she found Danny. There's this really stupid, like, oh, the bracelet connects them to the afterlife, and there's a chance that Danny can return, which is so dumb. It's so dumb. But he doesn't bring himself back, he brings the kid back, which, like I said, doesn't really get mentioned throughout the rest of the story. So, and it's just, like, why didn't, it just, I just can't compute with this story anymore, as earlier on in the story, Missy basically proclaims that she knows where Gallifrey is. It's in the same location where it was. It's stuck in a parallel dimension, yes, but the physical location is still where it is. And the Doctor basically tells Clara that he found Gallifrey, but when we see flashbacks and he opens the door and there's nothing there, and he starts smashing into the TARDIS console. Some really great acting, some really great moments there as our characters part ways, and it seems like it's the end of Jenna Louise Coleman's time as companion. And originally this was supposed to be Clara's final outing. This was supposed to be Clara's moment. However, after the story aired, Clara decided to renew her contract and she appeared in series 9. This means that this ending here, though I think really is effectively done, where our characters basically lie to try and comfort the other person into believing that, you know, they found what they needed to, and it's this kind of little hidden idea that they kind of know that they've gone bad for each other, that they influence each other in a negative light, so that's why they're kind of lying to each other. But knowing this story retroactively, that this plotline goes nowhere, that Clara and the Doctor do reunite after this, it does kind of really detract from this scene. Though the story does have a post-credit scene, a pre-credit scene, where the Doctor gets introduced to Santa Claus, leading into the next story. And so that is Dark Water and Death in Heaven. Though it does have some really great moments. Michelle Gomez's introduction to Missy, though not the master per se, is a really great performance. Jenna Louise Coleman and Peter Capaldi really have some really great bits to work off with and have some really great moments of acting, especially in the first act of Dark Water. And Stephen Moffat has some really great dialogue here and there. And Rachel Talalay proves that she's a really great director. There's some really great shots, some really great iconic moments. One of my favourite moments in terms of directing is when the Doctor's fallen off the plane and he lands into the TARDIS midway through the air, as we see Missy and Slab's reaction to it as the quirky rendition of the 12th Doctor theme starts playing. And that's just full of energy and stuff. But it's all in service of a story which has so many contrivances, so many plot conveniences, so much character beats to just kind of get forgotten about or completely irrelevant to the main plot line of the story. It's a story which basically puts up its hand in the air halfway through the adventure. It's like, I don't care, let's just shove everything we can. Yeah, sure, Missy's the one that sent Clara the phone call. Why? Who cares? I've forgot that to wrap up that plot line and I need just to solve it somehow. It's just not very good. It's one of the weakest, if not the weakest, series finales the show has ever produced, in the revived era at least. And it kind of sucks. It sucks. The Cybermen, though there are that little elements that, I do like that scene where Danny basically gets the choice to delete his own emotions after basically suffering from a huge amount of this trauma in recent, like I said, completely forgotten about in the later half of the story, and seems only really there so we can have that emotional beat later with Clara and Danny, as the whole thing with the kid never gets brought up. And so, yeah, Dark Water, Death in Heaven kind of sucks. And that's what I can say about this story. So join me next time where the Doctor and Clara reunite to try and save a small base from deadly dream creatures, as the Doctor and Clara must team up with Santa and his elves. So join me next time for Last Christmas, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.